Once again, this is We Are What We Hated. This is episode 29. And it's probably there's a 30th in our future, I can tell. But for right now, Larry had asked if it were possible to have Paul Sandu come aboard with us. And I'm going to give it to Larry right now, too, to tell you all why he wanted to do an episode in concert with Paul. So go ahead, Larry, lay it out.
Okay, basically, since the theme of the show is We Are What We Hated, and we're talking about America and it's moving toward a fascist state and into the New World Order, I wanted to inject as much of Bible prophecy and also wanted to talk about economics and the economic crisis in this country. And I couldn't think of anybody that was more of a student of those areas than Paul. I've listened to him several times in different capacities, and he has a very good handle on that, and apparently he's done a great deal of research, and he's knowledgeable on those subjects, so I thought he'd be a great person to bring in to talk about these things. I was going to start off with reading a brief passage from a book called Prince of Darkness, Antichrist, and the New World Order, which was written in 1994 by Grant Jeffrey. Jeffrey was a bit prophetic in this. Remember, this came in 1994. The savings and loan crisis will cost the American taxpayer $1 trillion by the time everything's wrapped up. But the worst is still to come. A banking crisis is now shaping up that will dwarf the S&L crisis and bring down some of the largest banks in the country. The U.S. Office of Management and Budget has warned the country that the largest banks are in danger of failing, according to the top financial rating services. After decades of irresponsible loans to the third world and real estate ventures, the banks are awakening to the reality of their crisis. Paul, what I'd like for you to talk about is the banking crisis, the real estate crisis, and the crash of 2007 and 2008, and how you see America's future as far as the economy.
Well, yes, Larry, Keith, thanks for having me on your show. And to respond to your question, I think it would be wise for us to come to the conclusion that this is a crisis only for the 99%, you could say, but people who have orchestrated it, it is not necessarily a crisis for them. And if you make that distinction, then, we have to understand that there is some method to this madness, you might call it, and that the powers that be, they have different plans and purposes than you and I might have when we think about the economy. See, as far as the average person like ourselves are concerned, all we want is, we want to earn enough money to have a somewhat comfortable life, help our kids raise them and raise a family, and that's generally the financial goals for most people. Okay? The majority of people, that's all their goals are. They're not all there out to be, become gazillionaires or anything of the sort. So yes, it is true that, what has happened since, we could argue the past 40 years, but especially since the last 4 years or so, is indeed a crisis, but it is a manufactured crisis, and from looking at it from the bankers and in a power broker's perspective, it may not necessarily be a crisis at all.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Paul, and again, I read a brief passage from this book where I was really impressed that he kind of picked up on the economic signs early on, Mr. Jeffries. He's a Canadian, by the way. The third great crisis is the danger of hyperinflation destroying our economy. For the last few decades until now, the U.S. Treasury borrowed from Japan, Germany, or the Arabs, but these countries are now reluctant to buy U.S. Treasury bills. When these international financial sources monetize the debt by inflating the currency, they will be forced to print money in a variety of ways. As a small example of things to come recently, the Japanese and Arabs refused to purchase several billions in T-bills that are offered for sale by the Treasury every week. The government will be forced to monetize the debt. America will have to inflate its currency by printing money in a vain attempt to postpone economic collapse. if you think it can't happen here, consider the history of Germany in 1923 and Argentina in the 1970s. The reason I brought that up is one of the things that brought Hitler to power and pushed the Nazis over the top so that they were able to run the government of Germany was the economic crisis, and in particular hyperinflation of the early 1920s and into the 1930s, where the German people had to deal with taking a wheelbarrow full of paper money to a grocery store so they could buy a loaf of bread. I was wondering if you see hyperinflation in the immediate offing. Do you believe that hyperinflation will afflict the United States soon?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. Up until a couple of years ago, I would have, answered in the affirmative without even stopping to think about it. However, what I have learned, as we all have, is that these guys who are running the show, they have bags and bags full of tricks, that they keep pulling. They keep pulling rabbits out of their hats, and it's really become almost impossible to determine what the next move is going to be and how it will play out. So at this moment in time, I would say that a logical end to this, what has been done with this quantity, QE 1, 2, 3, 4, however many they are going to engage in, the logical end of this would be hyperinflation for sure. But when it might come, I have no idea. I think this game, I would have expected, like back in 2008, that, we would already, the system would have been in a much more serious state of collapse than it is at the moment. So the game can be certainly extended great while longer than most of us had envisioned. So he is right that, if things were normal in any sense of that word, yeah, we should have already had extremely high inflation, but it has been very tame. And that is because, for one thing, we don't understand the game fully, because the people that play the game, they make the rules as well. So you see, if you recall, back in about a year ago, everybody was talking about Greece. Mm-hmm. That Greece is going to be the new Lehman Brothers, and it's going to take the system down. And you know what? Greece came and went. It's already forgotten, right? Now they talk about Spain, and I'm sure it's also going to be somehow or the other, this will also pass. So all these problems are not being resolved. We understand that these problems are mounting, and they continue to mount. But how long it will be before the full consequences of these actions are felt on the street is very difficult to determine, Larry.
Let me run something by you all, if I could.
Sure.
All right.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm not so sure, because I've noticed this, and I talked to Liam a little bit about it and exchanged things in emails, Liam being someone who lives in Northern Ireland. And Greece comes back every so often. It may take 3 weeks or so, but if you watch the little blurbs in the morning news, whether it's on MSNBC or CNBC or whatever, it just keeps going. In other words, to me it seems that there's really nothing that's been fully resolved anywhere. And I don't know if you want to say this is also subject to a spin. I guess it is. To a partial blackout, maybe it is. Although it's a little difficult now because we have access to European news sources, which seem to be a little bit more ingenuous than what we have. So I think that plate's being spun, Paul, and will continue to spin as long as it's good for it to do so. The other thing I think about is this. I mean, if you want to talk about modern-day alchemy, and I kind of fool around with this, but actually I'm not kidding. You've all heard that anything can be used as currency as long as everybody believes in it. Hence, when Bill Still did his show on the Money Masters, he was talking about, you can use ballpoint pens if you want to, just as everybody says, okay, what's the value of this pen? Well, this is a $5 pen.
As long as you can establish it and agree upon it, I guess.
But now think of it this way, and I swear, finances, right, I don't know much about them. I don't really believe a lot in what we've been told about certain systems. I think that's all great for academia and for mainstream garbage. But think about it. I mean, there was a time when we had hard money, and then we went from the period of hard money to something that stands for hard money, And then the hard money in its bullion form or any form isn't around anymore. And I swear we are working on electrons. That's all this whole thing is. And it can be kept going because it has the momentum, and we're all like agreeing that it works. But I have a feeling that when the banks just want to pull the plug, and I clearly mean pull the plug, then you're going to see that in essence there was nothing there anyway. And I bring this up also because if there's any such EMP sabotage or anything of that nature, can you imagine people who could lose fortunes without losing anything because they were all electrons? You know what I mean? And I think for as far as control goes, that's one of the ways without killing people that you can get them to be very, very malleable. And I just think that's where we are today, and that the modern day alchemy is taking money, making it disappear into whoever's vaults and coffers over in Europe, and all we're doing is just punching in some keyboards. I mean, that's the only thing I can see happen, and they'll let that go just as long as they need to, because they got all the money. What's a loss to them? It's got to be impossible. Last thing, and I'll get out of here. Do you all remember Paul Burke?
I remember the name, but it doesn't.
Okay. Not too much. All right. Paul, he also, by the way, lives in Toronto, and he knew of you. I think you guys, I don't know if you've ever emailed, but Paul stepped out of this whole thing because he had a couple of life-changing crises with illness to members of his family, and I wish he would just drop a line or something. But Paul was the one that thought, and he used to go back and forth with Trudeau, that we would go into deflation. I think we kind of did that, and of course in some markets there's no way you can get around it. Housing is not going to rebound the way it wanted to. I mean, there's still, if you will, bargains to be had. But I think because of certain other elements and the way they play games with it, namely oil, you can see where a spike in prices in gasoline or whatever, especially in North America, translates to higher prices because it's getting trucked in, it's getting flown in. So I think we have deflation in a couple areas. But for the most part, they keep wanting to jack it up because have you ever seen any period of time in our lifetime where we've ever had a really deflation and where prices were rolled back? Never. So things are going to get more expensive and people are being paid less money. It's a nasty little diametric proportioned scenario that we've got cooking. I know that's a lot, and I don't even know if you want to speak to it, but anyway, if anybody does, go for it.
Well, I was just going to... Go ahead, Paul.
I do agree with you about the spend part, and I didn't mean to imply that the Greece situation had been resolved.
No, I know.
Okay, what has happened is they have kicked the can down the road, and that's what I was trying to say is like how far can they keep kicking this can down the road?
Right.
And having come to some understanding over the past few years, I would say that it could be done almost indefinitely, except when the people on the ground begin to feel the real consequences, as they are in Greece now. Okay, I mean, the lifestyle of the Greeks has been radically changed and lowered. They are really suffering, and if those hardships that they are forced to encounter, which they are termed as austerity, if it gets severe enough, then there is going to be some sort of uprising somewhere along the line. And at the moment, I don't see any austerity in America. That people may be unemployed. There may be, the unemployment may be high. Certain things that imply prosperity are no longer anywhere to be seen. But generally speaking, there are still enough social safety nets in place that nobody's, starving on the streets or anything like that. So until these government largesse is in play, there will be no revolution or people out on the streets.
Right.
So that's where it has to, the government trough has to stop being filled before we see the real consequences of all the actions that are being taken. Now, when you keep in mind, if this QE thing that they do, if all it takes is to print some digits in a computer, like you said, Viz, then they can keep doing that for a very long time, so they can keep people feeding people. The only question is that how long do they want to do that, because we do understand that ultimately they do want to pull the plug on the system, which also is prophetic and biblical that, that the system must collapse for the end-time prophecies to be fulfilled. So the only question is how much time do we have before that happened? I would have thought that it already would have happened, but at the same time, everything is already in place that it could happen literally overnight.
Larry, let me ask you something.
Sure.
Germany, we have to admit, has a great deal of resiliency. If you believe that part of the reason for World War I was to put a cap on Germany's, I guess, capabilities and projections, because obviously they had very little access to ocean-going lanes, and Britain apparently, if you're going to believe that one particular reason, was not happy with the challenge. Hence, we have World War I. All right, they get decimated to a certain extent. Bang, they spring up and they're ready to go with World War II, and it looks like they've come back from that. But here's what I wanted to ask you. And I'm thinking back in Peikoff's book, and I remember talking to Rita, who I had done a show with, because she was in Hitler Youth too. I mean, she didn't understand what was going on. All they knew is they had nice uniforms and things looked pretty good.
Yeah, it looked good to them as children.
So didn't Hitler supply something to the German people that put the brakes on the hyperinflation and made them feel like, we're back on track again?
Yeah, he did several things. One thing he did is he stopped reparation payments, and that helped the German economy right away. He also put people back to work through the same kind of thing that Roosevelt did in this country, the WPA type projects, the draining of the swamps, building schools, building roads. I forget the name of the highway system in Germany, but it's
the Autobahn.
It's one of the finest in the world, and still and probably better today than it was then. But he did a massive turnaround in the economy just by stopping the reparations payments, and he basically just said, the Treaty of Versailles is finished. We're not going to do these things, and we're not going to live by your rules. And he started to rebuild the German army. That helped a lot too, because he put the economy into a war economy and put people back to work in the factories to build implements of war.
Yeah, and
he was no fool. The man was extremely intelligent, and he knew the right people. He put Albert Speer into control of the German armaments industry, and basically Speer kind of revamped the country through the armaments industry.
It's interesting because although we didn't really go through hyperinflation, we experienced the hardship, I guess, from 32 through 41. Whereas Germany did also, but you hear the famous stories of hyperinflation in Germany, which is something I don't believe we partook of here. And yet in both cases it's admitted that what made the economies healthy was the war industry. And even the most unwilling belligerents about what got us out of the Depression will say that we started to climb out, almost went back in again around 38 or so. And then guess what? We get into a war and everybody's happy. So, just
that's
interesting.
Kind of the way, I'm not a socialist or a communist, but that's sort of the way capitalism works, or at least the way it's worked out in the 20th century was, war economy was the way that you got the country out of dire straits.
All
right, and thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
By the way, those war reparations for World War I, Germany finally finished paying them in 2010.
That's a heck of a lot of interest on that one.
Yes, it's true. Like it really, when I read that, I just kind of boggled my mind. I wonder how long it'll be before they finish World War II.
Well, I remember there was talk around New York back in the mid '80s, and I don't know if you guys, who knows where you all were at that time. I know, but I mean, being in the New York metropolitan area, this was a little bit more pronounced. There was a real not a dislike for the Japanese who started to come in and buy up real estate all over the place and got in banks and stuff. But there were some people who were saying, as a voice of reason, hey, I mean, slow down. If the Japanese want to pay overinflated prices for garbage real estate, let them do it. And two, He goes, if you want to find who the real banksters are, as far as foreign, it's the Germans. So, there you go. I mean, it's like Paul was saying, they paid it off. I mean, they're very astute economically, but sometimes, I mean, not that everybody has a target on the Japanese. That period is come and gone, I guess. But, I mean, they're very industrious, and they get right back up again. And as Paul just mentioned, I mean, there you go. And I can understand that.
Well, the West German economy, and eventually the German economy, when the East was put back with the West, but the Western, West Germany was rebuilt by money from the Bormann organization, the Nazis that were in league with American, French, British corporations. A great deal of money came from South America and from the corporations down there, and other corporate interests all over the world, put money back into rebuilding West Germany. I mean, the Nazis never died. Nazism never really went down. It just changed forms. And it had to go underground, and it's still somewhat underground, but that's how West Germany was rebuilt, by the money that was coming in from those corporations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, one thing we need to keep in mind is that nations only exist for us people.
That's right.
They do not really exist for the people at the top. It is all like one big net up there, and they are all interlinked, and they all think. And unless you are one of them, I think it's impossible to actually have that sort of mindset that these people must have, because we talk about Americans and Germans and the Brits or the French and other nationalities, but these people at the top, they just whether it's the Nazis or it's the Englishmen, they all work together anyhow.
Right.
Or the Americans. So it's like one big organization which is running the whole show. Whether it's not even the Chinese that are really our foes, you could say. They will all be used to destroy all nations in the end. But we must keep in mind that these problems, when we look at that there is somebody at the top, your president, for example, looking out for the interests of Americans, that is just not the case.
It's true about mercantilism. I mean, the people who run this show, have no country. There are people without a country because all they're interested in is the bottom line and their own little, not so little.
It's not even just the bottom line, Viz. When these people. Now look at how the evidence has been out in the open, especially since 2007. Look how much of a coordination these G7 central banks work with. Mm-hmm. And not just the G7, like China, India, everybody, they follow the same policies at the central banking level. And these obviously are originating from one central body. They're not like, none of these policies are in the benefit of any of the peoples of any of those countries.
No. Well, don't we all agree, though, that nations are not about, a place where huddled masses can be free? It's all about markets. That's all it is. And
it's all about the power of, I would say corporatism is the word, and globalism. And, really at the top of the pyramid, we all know Satan is in control of it all. And
what? Can I add something to that why Satan is the devil plays a role in this? See, the mercantilism, it goes way back to the very birth of evil in the Bible. And we can read that in Ezekiel 28, that when the anointed cherub, who is the father of evil, when iniquity was found in him, what his iniquity was, that by the multitude of your merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence. He was a merchant banker. He is the guy that started this buying and selling of God's creation that he had given freely to all his creatures. So that is a system that goes back way, 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 way ages before our time.
Right.
So this is something that, we think is modern, these banking systems or these corporatist systems that are in place today. No, they're not. These were invented like a long, long time ago, and the absolute master of all these is indeed Satan.
Right.
And the destruction of Satan and Babylon in the Bible is very much affiliated, or it's it symbolizes the system of economics. Okay, we can read that in the Revelation 18, that when this system does come to an end, the merchants, they weep because no man buys their merchandise anymore. That is the end conclusion of these things will be when the whole system has collapsed into complete, it'll be completely destroyed. But that is the system. This is, people don't understand that, that the devil, he is a merchant banker.
I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
No, it's true, though. It is biblical, very much so. Like, there's so many references to Satan, love of money being the root of all evil, like, how he is linked to buying, selling, the mark of the beast. It's all economics.
Even more than prostitution. Can you think of any industry that was more abiblical than banking?
None.
Right. I mean, we're all, it's been institutionalized. It's systemic. We all can't get away from it to varying degrees. But in the end, I mean, that is about the most noxious industry there possibly could be, because it just keeps going. Its victims continue to bleed. And, when I look at flags, and I know how we're supposed to feel about that, but honestly, the way I look at them now is that when I see a flag of a country, to me it's just a corporation ensign. That's all it is, just their emblem.
Right.
But they're not even like corporations symbolically. They are actual corporations. But the United States is a corporation.
We are.
Canada is a corporation. It's like they're all corporations. Every town, every city is registered legally as a corporation.
That's true. That's true. I want to die. No, all right. Go ahead, Larry. Thank you.
Well, the next thing I was going to talk to you about, Paul, or ask you about, was the police state, which I believe very soon, within the next few years, the United States, which is already in the process of moving toward a police state, will come to be something along the same lines as Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that. I'm pretty sure you do, and I wanted to hear, your thoughts on it and how you see that developing.
Well, it is developing rather rapidly, with the advances in technology in particular. I would say that all the accoutrements of a police state are already in place. So I'm sure all of us, there are not just files, I'm sure there's like gigabytes or maybe terabytes of data on each and every person. And Orwell's 1984 would probably be nothing to the type of police state that can be implemented at the drop of a hat, especially in a place like the United States, which has devoted so much money and personnel to creating a police state. I mean, just the increase since 9/11, the size and budgets of all these departments that we have, you probably can't even list all the alphabet agencies that are involved in spying and in essentially controlling the citizens within the borders of the country. This got nothing to do with fighting this fictional Al-Qaeda or anything else. It's all these things have been put place within your nation. And I'm just speaking about the U.S. here, but it's also the same in most of the developed world, where they have the money and the technology is readily available. It's also the same in Canada, the Britain, everywhere else. All these countries have done it. But I think it's more so in the U.S. than probably anywhere else in the world. So the perfect nightmarish, like something out of a science fiction type of police state can be and probably will take some shape or form in the very near future in the U.S., or at least what will be left of the U.S., because I think it is not going to remain in its present, at least politically speaking, and possibly even geographically speaking. There will be some changes that will come first before we see that full and final police state come into play. but I think it is very much so already here. It's just a matter of being brought out into the open, like it was with the Gestapo and the SS in Nazi Germany.
But remember something also, it's not necessarily all the hardware and the SWAT teams that come out. What's happened also in back of a police state, more or less, and of course this has been made possible because of a terrorist event on 9/11. But think about all the freedoms that have been pared back, the things you can't say, certain things that are not a big deal that now become questionable, how people now are more, well, I'm not going to say everyone, but if you say something controversial, you're more at risk of being turned in anonymously. And we've all seen that kind of stuff. See something, say something.
Mm-hmm. That's like Winston and his neighbor in 1984, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Like it's so you don't know who's spying on you and who's going to. It's like a few years ago we could openly discuss these topics in just about any company, and not be. But nowadays, yes, that danger is very real. That if unless you know the person that you're going to. You have no idea who that person is or what they're doing or what information they're gathering. This happens in Cuba, by the way, where they have these, every apartment building, every region, they have these guys that are working for the state, and they keep tabs on all the people that live in the apartment buildings in that, in a town or city. So they have all the information that is gathered on them, and then they are turned in frequently for whatever at the whim of these monitors that they have, and that also has been put in place already in the U.S., which nobody would have believed, even 10 years ago, that this is where things are going to come to, and this whole this culture of fear that has been promoted by this fictional Goldstein enemy that's out there, it is very pervasive now. You can almost touch it, it's that how pervasive it has become, people's thoughts. And this is what Orwell's book was about, control of language, control of my people's minds, control of their thoughts. And, without knowing, without really understanding, most people, they are mind control, where they don't even allow themselves to think anything that would be considered anti-government or anti-authority. Because they are afraid to do that, and that has certainly been something that has become much more pervasive since 9/11 than it used to be in the previous century.
All right, so we can agree that a lot of the police state is the atmosphere that's created without anything really happening with regard to shooting events.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to just read you something real quick. I've gone back to this. It was a speech that was given in '55. By John Lord O'Brien, who was a leading Republican in New York State. And they talked about the Internal Security Act of 1950. And the comments were, the power to seize and imprison an alien enemy during wartime has been recognized since 1798. But this is the first time in our history that Congress has attempted to authorize imprisonment of a citizen because of suspected intentions, with the clause being such person probably will engage or probably will conspire with others. That's very scary, and yet that's come back in spades right now, and all this social networking is, not, much as that's a nice catchphrase, and I don't know, Larry, you want to go there, but I think part of the whole thing with Hitler also was taking patriotism and making it, spy on your neighbor for the good of the fatherland.
Well, I think that the thing that amazes me about social networking is they have made, especially young people in this country and I guess in others, they've made it seem cool and hip to basically put all your information on the internet, so that anybody that wants to know about you and your friends can just go in there and glean any information that they want. It's basically putting you in the position of snitching on yourself without even knowing it.
Employers
put it all out there.
I'm sorry, man. Employers right now, and I mentioned this just a little bit before, are now demanding, like, I don't know if it got as bad as they want the person's Facebook password.
Right.
Employees are supposed to give up, any the access points for their page. That's pretty sick. But then the old story is, well, hey, then don't have one, But what's going to be scary is the question, like for someone like myself, perhaps you and Paul, I don't know, but it's like, why don't you have a Facebook page?
I don't have one.
Yeah.
You know, what's wrong with that? Why don't you have one? What do you got to hide?
Yeah, there's something wrong with you. You're some sort of maybe you're a subversive, maybe even a terrorist.
Or a redneck in your case. All right.
You know, one thing
What's that, Paul?
which I think is one of the most scariest aspects of this police state is the militarization of the police forces. And this has happened all across, the Western world, especially in the USA, where, that old, I remember, 30 years ago, if you ran into a cop, first of all, they used to have those benign blue uniforms. And, they generally would, when I had in my younger, wilder days, I remember getting pulled over, and I was like, drunk like a skunk, and, the guy just told me, go home, buddy, go sleep it off or whatever. None of that kind of stuff is around. Those people have been pushed out of the police force where they used to be public servants at one time. And now these guys that have brought in here, man, they are scary. And that's what is necessary. You could say the brown shirts are already now across police departments all over the country, and these characters are scary. They really are. They will shoot people at the drop of a hat for no reason, and they do all the time. And that is something that was essential, and that is a big clue to me that this police state is much closer today now than it was 10 or 15 years ago, because these changes have all happened very rapidly since 9/11. They were in place since the 90s. They started to do that in big cities like L.A. or, some of those Chicago and those places. But now it's everywhere in the country.
Right.
Before we go any further, I want to give Paul a chance to talk about his websites. But before I do that, I think, Larry, you'll remember in some emails that we were exchanging, Kay, I think, was kind of alarmed about all the toys that local police force, law enforcement agencies were buying. And I mean, but I said to her, well, yeah, but remember, 9/11, part of that Department of Homeland Security allowed money to be used by law enforcement to beef up whatever they had.
Right. I was going to say that something that kind of shocked me about 3 or 4 years ago. I don't live very far from the Department of Public Safety here in Austin, the state capital, the state police. And I happened to be driving by their facility one day on my way to grocery store or whatever, and I looked over and I saw it in the parking lot, one of the parking lots in the back, that there were 3 armored vehicles. I mean, these were full-blown armored vehicles, complete with gun mounts. Mm-hmm. And the Army would be proud to have these things. Oh, yeah. And I'm thinking, wow, the state police need, armored vehicles, and that's the condition that we've got going. I mean, good luck to anybody, having a demonstration that turns into a riot. Well, they're going to drive in there with these guys and start shooting up the place. There was
another militia group that got busted. That's like the second in a year or so. And what comes out of this is the fact that if they've got certain armaments, what law enforcement is saying, well, if they've got 50 cal, we want 50 cal.
Right.
And, I mean, I can understand it on that level, but that's what's abetting it. And sometimes I'm thinking that even these militia groups are being led down a path to create a situation where they can turn around and say, okay, this is why we need the weaponry. So, again, you don't have to have everybody in the streets to understand that you're under some kind of police state, but as the informer would say, I mean, we've been under military rule since the Civil War. So,
right. All
right, real quickly, Paul, I want to mention your sites because they were up with our last audio. They'll be up with this one. But why don't we start with signsoftheend.com? .net. I'm sorry, I always do that. Signsoftheend.net.
It's both, and it's either one works actually. .net or .com. Either one is fine.
Thanks for taking the pressure off me. All right, but from there you can go to Apocalypse 2010 Blogspot, right? And you've got 2 video channels on YouTube that are also happening, correct?
By the way, YouTube, yes, I do have 2 YouTube channels, but YouTube itself has become, they've become gatekeepers now.
Oh, yeah.
Because it really is. Like, there's so many of my videos have been, you're an infringement of some, because you insert some sort of clip, which under all these fair use, it should be fine, and they have blocked, time, and now they're not allowing me to upload videos more than 15 minutes and all that kind of. It's just become horrible. I think we should start boycotting these kind of Google and YouTube and all these, and look for alternative other places where we can disseminate our information. It's become really. That is another sign of the Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany happening, where these companies, you're supposed to be living in a free country, and you are innocent until proven guilty, and they just do that. They'll have these. It's all done computerized.
Right, exactly.
This computer will decide, okay, your video is not meeting our whatever guidelines they have set, and therefore we're going to take it off, or we're going to block it, and that's what they do. But they do it so much now that it's just becoming sick. Because
of infringement situations, copyright infringement, and there are, they get very draconian, and it's headed that way. There's no two ways about it. I mean, there is at the root, yes, there's definitely a situation there, but then there's also a point where even if you were writing a term paper and you quoted someone and gave obviously attribution, it would be all right. That does not necessarily clear you when you use something electronically. And even though I look at YouTube sometimes and I see people say, listen, this is fair usage, I don't profit by it. With what's going on now, I tell you what, that would not help you at all in a federal court. So it is. There's a chilling effect on the First Amendment. There is some real reasons for it, but like everything else, you guys, I don't have to explain it to you, whatever, that you take something that's a problem, but you make it obviously something that's like a pandemic, and then you just bring in all these draconian laws and nobody does anything. And so, Paul, yeah, you're right. In the electronic sector, it's getting to be extremely difficult to navigate through those waters. And when they come down on you, as I remember from writing an article about this a year ago for the American Free Press, when they come down on you, there's no place to hide. So it's an up and budding situation, but the goal is the same. Don't share information. Don't incite the natives. So.
Well, I mean, your Blog Talk Radio experience kind of freaked me out.
It didn't do much for me either.
I mean, that was like, wow. I knew that there was, that these things were going on. I knew that there was a tightening of, information being, them clamping down on information they didn't want out. But when you actually see a friend experience that, when you see that this, quote, great freedom that you're supposed to have, freedom of speech, and you see somebody who just, they throw you off the air, they essentially annihilate the program, and, nobody ever knows what happened. And they give you an excuse as, well, they didn't give you an excuse. Didn't tell you why. They just censored your program. And that was that.
You see, what they did is they gave me the boilerplate statements, about what is not allowed, but they didn't tell me what in my program fit that bill.
Right.
So the guy sends me this boilerplate thing. I'm going, yeah, I know your rules and regulations. I want to know in my speech, my language, my expression, what violated what you put down. He would never answer me. And Paul, I don't know if you remember that when that happened, but what was funny was I had just gone on Blog Talk with Jim, Big Jim in Illinois, and we were a bullet. We were doing so well. Get this, that they said they wanted to feature us, like whenever they do like weekly. And so It's so ironic that probably at the time they were going to go ahead and feature us, they heard that and they freaked out. So if we had not even had that kind of attention, we might have been okay at least for a little while longer, because there were 9/11 shows on there.
You were cooking on that show. I mean, you were really doing well and explaining issues, and the discussion on the show was really excellent. And that's the thing that really bugged me too, was this was the best I'd ever seen you do.
Right.
They said she can throw you off the air.
Oh, then you know why I've been lousy ever since. In fact, that was with Killtown for Flight 93, and that was a rocking show that day. Yeah.
It was. It was great.
Right. So here I am in Florida.
Yes, but that what this is. There is definitely being. It is being. We can all sense it now. Whereas when we first started talking, Keith, like we could talk on the air and we could do our shows, we could say whatever. There was none of these things, even on YouTube. Even up until, a year ago, you could put whatever you want to essentially, and it would probably slip by. with that. But now it's like instantaneous. Like I upload a video, and like 5 minutes later, it'll have some sort of copyright, matched content, et cetera, et cetera. It's like happens instantly, and it's definitely that censorship is being ratcheted up. No doubt about that.
You know, one of the things about Nazi Germany, I've read several things and seen interviews with people who lived in that time, and they said that the thing that got them, that really, the way the Nazis accomplished what they wanted to do as far as censorship, was they did it incrementally, very slowly, and you didn't realize. It's like that old saying about, the frog being boiled. It was very slowly done, and I think that's exactly what's happening with us, is our freedoms of expression, freedom of speech, and so forth, is being eroded very slowly. And after a certain point, all the everything will be in place to completely shut it down.
And the ironic thing about it is, but those who are snitches need even less evidence for their charges.
Right.
And that's another thing that O'Brien was talking about in that speech he gave in 1955. He's going, hey, listen, not being faced with your accuser flies in the face of any kind of decent law. And, of course, back then, back at the Red Scare, to fill in the time it took between World War II and Korea, and then a little bit after that and before Vietnam, I mean, the snitch state was alive and well, and we're visiting that again, although I think exponentially it will get a lot worse.
I think you're right.
Undoubtedly it will. But you see, that's what especially if we believe in Scripture and in prophecy, then that is absolutely what is to be expected. I mean, the words that Jesus used, he didn't mince words, He said it's going to be a time of great distress. It's going to be a time of distress of nations. It's going to be a time like none other in history. So, we don't even have any precedent that we can look back upon and say it's going to be like, yes, we can say it's going to be somewhat like Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany, but I think in the final analysis, they'll probably prove to be quite tame compared to that which is coming now.
Or, I had mentioned some months ago that if I could describe what this country and maybe even the world is about right now, if I could only have one descriptor, it would be deceit. And that's all that's taking place now. I mean, going through Scripture and looking through Thessalonians and Timothy recently, there's so many warnings about all kinds of deceptions, ruses, people falling out of the faith. And I think today, I mean, it's very difficult at times to try to find an honest broker or at least information that is free of any kind of bias so that you actually get to make up your mind. And I don't really think that's in a program, obviously, and that is for us to be critically analytic and to make up our own mind. So all the information that we encounter in a day, think about it. And think about how many times you take in messages, even if it's for advertising, we understand that. But think about every time you take in information, how much time people like ourselves, because we're from a generation where you were taught to think critically, have to straighten out what we know is a crooked message. Do you know what I mean? You kind of like decode it and say, okay, what does this really mean?
Yes.
Yeah, every time I see a politician on television, it's like, but it's that old thing about, the Bible tells us that Satan is a liar and the father of lies.
Yeah.
And that is the way that the satanic empire is put forth. It's through deception.
It is.
To it.
Well, it's everywhere in politics and religion and education and media. Whatever sources of information are out there, they're all deceptive.
What also has happened, though, it's the default attitude, and I'll even take academia at this, because I saw this change radically from the time I was in school in the first half of the 70s, when I returned in the middle of the 90s. And I was surprised to see that there is this, like I said, default reaction about how dare you question the professor or suggest the professor may not be, in fact, right. I couldn't believe it. And I think that's what happens more and more. It's like, what's your problem? We didn't ask you to think about it and process it and spit something back out. We told you this is the way it is, and you better believe it. That's what's freaking me out, and that is really, if you ask why, it's like, why are you a troublemaker?
Right, and I think conversely, the professors are not really having academic freedom the way they used to. I saw a show on actually on the teaching of evolution and how it was done by Ben Stein, and he was talking about a professor here in Texas at Baylor University who questioned the theory of evolution. He was I guess a zoology professor, and he questioned certain things about it and wrote a book questioning those things, and he was he was a tenured professor, but he wound up not having a job anymore. I mean, I don't think academic freedom, which used to be a mainstay of the university system in the United States, it's just not there anymore, I don't think.
But I'd also have to say that I've seen a change in professors also who don't mind a lack of freedom,
right?
Because it plays to their pride. And the professor cohort that I saw both at St. Leo's and University of South Florida. Now, again, my salad days when I went the first time was in New York, and that was a really great place to be as far as the vibrancy and the allowance of exchanges of ideas. But now I'm looking at it, it's like, and I'm like, you son of a guns, honest to goodness. I mean, they want to lord it over everybody. They don't want to be asked questions. It's my word is gold, and that's all there is to it.
Right.
So in a sense, some of this academic freedom, I think the professors are more than happy to not have as well. I know they don't want to be impinged upon, but they don't mind shutting up Johnny if he's got a couple of questions.
Right. The same thing happened in Nazi Germany. For example, I remember reading about a professor. He was like a liberal professor who was teaching a class in biology and was showing how, human blood, it doesn't matter about race. I mean, blood is blood, and that, there are, it's basically the same for all human beings. There are different types, but blood is blood. And
right.
He eventually wound up being imprisoned in a concentration camp for teaching that because it didn't follow Aryan racial theory. Because Jewish blood would be different from Aryan blood, and that kind of thing, where they just totally ignore science, and if it doesn't fit their political belief system, they would censor that person and eventually imprison him.
Well, it flies in the face of Scripture too, but of course nobody wants that book to be taken anywhere as anything but fable.
No.
But anyway.
We can't do that. That might be the truth.
Well, academics, going back to Jesus' day, they have always been anti-God, so there is no surprise there.
Right.
That even like going back 100 years, like these academics, they're not necessarily godly people. So essentially there's always a flaw in their teaching. Some of them had some sort of principles, which I think have somewhat or completely disappeared. But I mean, I know a few people that are professors and academics, and they are so entrenched in the system that they would die to defend it. Mm-hmm. So they are really like in the movie Matrix, where he said that until these people are unplugged, they are basically our enemies, and that is the truth. That these people, they are so well plugged into the system, into the matrix, that they really are. They become the whole system, and without them, the system would not be able to. It wouldn't exist.
Well, the whole idea of academia, a great deal of the philosophy behind it and the ideals behind it came from the Greeks, and
yes.
And if you study the New Testament, Paul said, due to their clinging to the idea of logic, that the gospel to them was foolishness. In other words, it didn't seem logical to them. They couldn't believe in the supernatural. They couldn't believe that God would be incarnated and would die as a blood sacrifice for our sin. They couldn't buy that. And they said, of course, to the Jews it was a stumbling block. But I think that kind of relates to academia as well.
Yes, but then, academics, they end up believing in some really far-fetched and illogical things like evolution, and, that they just sprang out of nowhere, that there's nobody who's in control here. So, I mean, the things that they end up believing make them fools, because the Bible does say, when the fool has said in his heart there is no God. So no matter how many degrees they have and how many behind their names, alphabets they have behind their name, it doesn't matter. They do become fools, and that's what they are.
Well, Biz, you have something to say?
Oh, no, I thought you were clearing your throat. I'm all right. I'm sorry. I popped off enough.
Well, you had some questions that you wanted to, Larry, and you had emailed me, you wanted to talk about the vials and the judgments, etc., in the book of Revelation. And what I wanted to say in regards to that is, see, most of our understanding of Scripture, especially the prophetic portions of it, has come to us from people that are an integral part of organized religion, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we need to go is we need to throw all that understanding out that was given to us, and we need to go back to Scripture and see what it really says. So you had specifically asked me that, what will transpire during the pouring out of the 7 vials. And I thought about it, and then Viz had asked me a question on our last program where he said, how long do you think will the tribulation be? And, it kind of stumped me for a minute, because it has been so commonly accepted that the tribulation is a period of 7 years or 3.5 years or so, that it is, taken as the gospel truth. Then I thought about these things, and I came and I said, no, this is not. The Bible does not really teach that. As a matter of fact, if we really parse, passages of Scripture such as Matthew 24 very carefully, then I would have to say that the period of the tribulation, what the Bible calls the tribulation, could actually last something like 40 years. Okay, it won't be quite 40 years, but it'll be close to that once it begins, and it has definitely not begun yet. We are close to that time, I think, but it has certainly not begun. So, the return of Christ, like people say, he might be coming back tomorrow, I would have to say that is not what the Scriptures teach. I would place, like the coming of Christ, for example, would be the earliest I would think would have to be somewhere at the midpoint of this century if things start happening that are prophesied to happen. Now, talking about these vials and trumpets and everything else, I think the majority of people, of us, folks, are not going to probably survive the opening of the seals. Okay, so I highly doubt that any one of us are alive today, like, most of us who are, the wrong side of 50, for example, are going to be alive to see the pouring out of the vials. We are not going to make it. We probably won't even be around to see the Antichrist.
Right.
That is what the Scriptures really teach. So we need to go back and we need to see what Jesus called the beginning of sorrows, and we need to focus on that time rather than worrying, what's going to be the mark of the beast, or, who's the Antichrist going to be, or what will happen during the time of the vials or the judgment of the whore of Babylon. Those events are way, way down the line yet.
Let me ask you this. Viz and I both believe there will be a third world war. I'm not talking about Armageddon, but I'm talking about a third world war prior to that time, which would usher in the time of the Antichrist, which would bring in world government. Do you see that?
I see more than one-third. Yes, absolutely. I don't know how you would define a world war. Okay,
Yeah.
There will probably be a war that in its destructive power would be greater than the Second World War. Okay, so that is without doubt. But I think before even the time of the Antichrist, we are going to see probably 3 or 4 of these type of wars, which are going to be very, very, large in scale, and that are going to be very destructive, both from the breaking down of infrastructure as well as in the number of lives that will be lost in those wars. Because in the book of seals, when the seals are opened, there is going to be some very, very major wars. And then when the trumpets are blown, which happens before the Antichrist comes, there's going to be even bigger wars. And then, when we get to the time of the vials, there's going to be even bigger. And then finally, when Jesus returns, That will be the Psalm 2 war, which will be, the final war. So we have many, many wars down in our future yet. It is not just going to be one World War III, Larry. There's going to be more than that.
Well, see, that's an interesting concept. I'd never, until I heard you speak on that subject, I had never heard it expressed that way. I personally, the way I was raised, and I'm not saying that this is correct, I'm just saying this is the teachings, the things that I heard and what my parents taught me, was that there would be a Third World War, and that particular war they believed would be the Gog-Magog war as spoken of in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And they believe that the
Gog-Magog war will come, but I think that's going to be much further down there. Right now, the war, like what we might call World War III, might be something involving Israel and in the Middle East, which would not be an all-out war involving Russia and China and the rest of them. No,
right.
That war with the kings of the East, that comes much later, which is when I think would be what we might call the Gog-Magog war. So the Gog-Magog war is not quite going to be what we will probably end up calling World War III.
That's interesting. I'd never heard that particular viewpoint before, but I can see some logic in that. It does seem to be, the pattern of mankind, continuous war, because of that the nations of the world just cannot seem to get along. Just due to the power struggle going on constantly. I mean, that's, historically accurate. And this century, not this century, but the 20th century, would seem like it was nothing but war. I mean, every time you looked around, there was some war, whether a major world war or a relatively large war, such as Korea, and then Vietnam, et cetera. There was always a relatively major war going on, and it seems like it just accelerated. And now we're coming into a time with the 9/11 kickoff of what I believe will be a much larger conflagration eventually.
See, what happens is, like, this is why I said that we have to put aside all our prophetic understanding,
right,
that has been given to us, because most of it is unscriptural. Okay, organized religion is the biggest tool that Satan uses to spread lies. Right. He mixes in. Jesus said, "The little leaven leavens the whole lump." Okay, so whatever these churches have taught, even if it is 90% truth, we mix it in with 10%, even 5% falsehood, it will eventually all end up becoming false. The book of Revelation, Larry, is, first of all the events that are written in it, it's a sequential book, okay? A lot of these interpretations, they are based on concurrent fulfillment of these prophecies, but that is not how the Bible teaches. Okay, these things will happen one after the other, and if you read Revelation time after time, and after that, and after these things, telling you that there's a progression of time in which these events will transpire. And it is both the magnitude and the pace at which these things keep on happening, they keep on increasing. Okay, so it is going to be like an orchestra which begins off, with slowly, and it builds up to a crescendo. And that is how these events are going to happen. Okay, for example, to give you one, like in the book of when the time of the trumpets, for example, it says, these things that whatever it is going to be fell into the waters, like a mountain burning with something like a mountain that fell into the waters, and a third of the waters were poisoned. But when we get to the time of the vials, it tells us all of the waters are poisoned. So you see, there's the degree of the judgments is going to become more severe as time goes by.
Yeah. Right.
So people just think that all these things are going to be over in a period of 5-7 years or, something like that, and boom, Jesus will return. I have to differ with that very strongly, with that interpretation, because even the time when we get to Revelation chapter 6, the time of the opening of the seals, especially the first 4 seals, that'll correspond to what Jesus termed the beginning of sorrows in Matthew 24. That period of time alone could last anywhere, 7 to 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And it is going to be a period of time in which potentially, by the time we get to the end of the seals, 50% of the Earth's population could have been wiped off by then. Mm-hmm. That is the magnitude of these judgments that we are staring at. And people take it very casually, and they just said, oh, okay, that they don't understand, how drastic these things are going to be. That's why when people say that, we are now the third trumpet has been blown, and this has happened, and, I kind of shake my head, because they have no idea. They don't read Scripture when it tells us that by these, and the 4th seal is opened, and not counting what happened prior to that a fourth of the Earth's population was killed off. Just imagine, what do we have, something like, let's say even 6 billion, that's 1.5 billion to 2 billion people that are going to die off in a matter of a few short years, let's say 3 to 5 years. That, I think, is something
the Bible says is, except those days be shortened, no flesh shall be saved. And
that is true. See, the time period, Larry, that Jesus assigned to the fulfillment of all these prophecies, till all things written be fulfilled, was the time of one generation. A generation in the Bible is 40 years long, and I've had this debate with many people. But in Hebrews, it tells us, in the book of Hebrews, that God was displeased with that generation that wandered in the wilderness for 40 years.
Right.
In the book of Matthew, it gives us genealogies that from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and so when we count those generations, they correspond to a period of 40 years. Okay, so this year in the New Testament, the period of time that is given to a generation is 40 years. And that is what Jesus said, that generation who began to see the fulfillment of these things will not pass away before all these things are going to be fulfilled. So potentially these things could last up to 40 years. But the days, yes, will be shortened. But that doesn't mean that it is going to be over in 7 years. It may potentially mean that instead of 40, it could be over in 35 years. You see, but it is still going to take a long time. Even taking those periods of time which are quantified for us, like, for example, the testimony of the 2 witnesses, which is 3.5 years, the time that the Antichrist is given rule over the whole earth. Now, that is, by the way, is not the total period of time that the Antichrist will be on earth. He'll be here longer than that, but that is the period of time for which he will have control of the whole planet, is 3.5 years. So when you start adding these periods of time that are given, those periods alone add up to 10, 15 years.
Right.
And then we have other events that are not, we don't have an exact time frame for. So that's why I am 100% convinced that when these things begin, it is going to be much longer than most people have thought it will be. And that's why Jesus said that the love of many is going to wax cold, because not just that the heat will have been turned up, they will have expected, for example, at the end between the seals and the trumpets, for example, there might be a lull, and people will think, okay, now this is it, this is the end now. But no, we are just going into the next phase, which is going to be even more destructive, and it is going to be even more intense than the one that just passed. So that's why I do not subscribe to this 7-year tribulation theory any longer. I did for a long time, but no more.
That's why I wanted to. One of the main reasons I wanted to ask you on the show was to probe into that question a little more, because I was fascinated by your response to that on one of the shows you did with Viz, and I think another video that I saw on YouTube was I had never heard anyone say that the tribulation would last much longer than 7 years. But when I started thinking about it and the way you explained it, started to make sense. Now, obviously, you took quite a bit of time thinking about it yourself and came to that conclusion, and it's a very interesting, interpretation there. And in fact, I really think you're correct. I don't know how long the period will be, but it does make sense that it would be a lot more than 7 years.
There is if you really want to get technical about it, there may be a period of time within the tribulation which could be called the Great Tribulation. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that I will concede may actually be 7 years or so long. Okay, but the time from the beginning of sorrows, when Jesus described in Matthew 24:7, that nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places, and all these are the beginning of sorrows. Okay, so that was just the beginning. And after that, if you keep reading in the book of Matthew alone, leaving aside the book of Revelation for now, there is so much more that keeps on happening after the beginning till we get to the very end. So how much time is going to, that period of time between the beginning to the end of the sorrows, which will end obviously with the return of Jesus, that period of time is by no means only 7 years long. It is much longer than that. And, we have, this is the thing about prophecy, okay? Now, as I have learned, and this is something which I've come to understand recently, is that the Word of God is very plain, okay? We have been given so much information regarding this period of time, which is let's say the time of the last generation, the time of the end of the world, because that term, the end of the world, is definitely used in Matthew 24:3. And if God used that term, then perhaps we should think that the implications of that how drastic it is for God to say that this will be what shall be the signs of the coming and of the end of the world. Okay, the end of the world, obviously, I might qualify here, it doesn't mean the end of the earth itself. But what it does mean is the end of the world that exists on the earth in a very literal sense, where all our cities, all the infrastructure that has been built on it, all the things that man has made on it, and all the systems that we spoke about earlier in the show that have been created to govern life on it, all these things are coming to an end. Okay, that is what the end of the world means from a scriptural perspective. The earth, we know, will continue even after this present world has come to an end.
Yeah. These people that say it's the end of the world, and they're talking about the end of the world. The world's not going to end. It's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And then after that,
But this earth will continue at least for another 1,000 years.
Right.
That's what the scriptures teach us.
Right.
So the earth is not coming to an end. Mind you, if you study, especially in the book of Revelation, where it talks about things like that all the islands fled away, okay, that the geological destruction is going to be so violent and so extreme that the geography of the earth, when Jesus returns, may be quite different from what it is today. Okay, so we should not assume that the map will look exactly. We may have missing continents and we may have new land masses. It may actually be something like we saw in the movie 2012, on that scale. I mean, there is this information that Hollywood gets. Satan's read the book too. He understands what's coming better than probably all of us. So, to give them these ideas, there is some nuggets of truth in these things, that is the magnitude of the destruction that we may witness. And like I said, if it is going to be on that scale, and on top of that we got the persecution that has been guaranteed by Jesus for people who truly believe, so it is very unlikely that, we guys are going to be around to see the return of Jesus.
No. I agree.
It's not, but that's not such a bad thing when we do understand that, this body's mortal anyways. It's going to die anyhow. That doesn't mean that we are going to, cease existing or our life is going to come to an end. We have been promised eternal life. And the Apostle Paul did say that it is far better to be with the Lord than it is to be, in this body. So if the body does come to an end, it's not the end of the world. Let's put it that way.
No,
so
it's going to end anyway.
It's going to end anyways, right?
Yeah.
So it's nothing to be afraid of. See, that's why we don't need to. Yes, we don't need to be stupid, but all our energy should not be devoted to just trying to save the body.
Right.
That's something that just cannot be saved anyhow.
I'll tell you guys that on this chassis. Oh boy.
As you know, I've had some bionic parts put in here.
Well, but I do want to share some because you talked about, obviously Satan has insight to things. And I just want to bring back up, I'm pretty sure, Larry, you remember this. I don't know if Paul does. But I bought a book from the Rosicrucians out of Quakerstown, Pennsylvania, who consider themselves the descendants of the original German Rosicrucianism. And in that book interestingly, it's entitled The Menissus Chronicles. Mm-hmm. And you can split that between man and Isis, and you have Menissus. Now, the author who wrote under a pseudonym, or nom de plume, or whatever you want to call it, wrote about a scenario that I find exceptionally intriguing and quite possible. Because, again, as you mentioned, they know what the score is to a certain point. And the writer posited that now, I don't know how far back that book goes. I'm not sure it was pre-9/11 or not. I gave it away to Gordon. But anyway, in it, it says that the old world wanted paybacks, basically, and were going to give us our comeuppance. Just said old world. And the scenario they painted was this, that our troops were elsewhere scattered abroad, and basically there was nobody home. And we were invaded by international armies, and the only reason why the invasion stopped was because there was a geological cataclysm that, just as you had said before, Paul, and this is what made me think about it, some continents sank and some appeared. And they broke off the hostilities to go back and find out whether these soldiers had anything left in their homeland. And I tell you what, again, I don't look up to these characters, but I will say they probably have a pretty good insight into the way things are going to go. And I find that scenario very, very plausible.
I do too. And I want to actually address another question which Larry had asked about, what will be the fate of the United States. And I wanted to answer both your question, what you're talking about here is, and that question that Larry had posited, and I want to answer that in light of prophecy. See, people, they sort of put the cart before the horse, and that's why they're looking at the Antichrist when the coming of the Antichrist, when all the things that must happen before the Antichrist ever makes his appearance in the open have not yet happened. See, it is quite clear that the chronology of the events that are going to transpire as this present world comes to an end is quite clear in the Bible. So all we need to look at, for example, is Revelation chapter 6 and Matthew chapter 24, verse 7. What will happen is that Jesus said there will be wars and rumors of wars, there will be pestilences, there will be famines, and there will be earthquakes in diverse places. What that means is that this whole planet is going to be inflicted by one or more of these things simultaneously. That day, when that day comes, when we have warfare going on, when we have some pandemics going on, when we have some major famines going on, and when we have major cataclysms, generally related to some very powerful and mega earthquakes. By the way, that word that Jesus in Luke, he said there will be great earthquakes. That word great in the original Greek is the word mega. So the earthquakes that Jesus prophesied about are not these 4 or 5 magnitude earthquakes. I would think they're probably going to be on the scale of 9 or 10. That's how big these earthquakes are going to be, that are going to signify that these are the end of the world prophesied events, not what is happening today. See, the things like Fukushima, etc., those earthquakes that happened, they are pointing to those days coming, but they have not yet arrived. So this is my point. How can we know when prophecy has begun to be fulfilled? How can we know that the time that the clock has started ticking on the last generation? We will know when we see all four of these things happening everywhere. War, there will be some regions that will be engulfed in major wars. There will be some that will have a major pandemic outbreak. There will be some that will be, there will be some major famines and droughts that will be overtaken some regions of the world. And then, some regions that will be experiencing some mega disasters. When we see that happening all the way from South America to the easternmost part of Russia and, all points in between, then we will know that the sorrows have begun. From that time, the clock will have started ticking, and we can count down that the final end will be no more than 40 years away. Okay, now, when we look at these prophecies, we can use some God-given logic, and we can paint a picture of which region will be inflicted by what sort of problems. It is very logical that the Middle Eastern, Asia, Eurasian regions may be involved in war. What I think will befall North America and possibly South America would be not famine or drought so much, but probably something like a pandemic and some major geological upheavals. There's too much of this sort of predictive programming that has also been put out by Hollywood, where you have shows like 10.5 Apocalypse, where they show the New Madrid and the breaking apart of the North American continent, where you had the East Coast being ravaged by tsunamis and essentially Florida. By the way, you might want to move this, falling off into the sea. That's what I foresee. And if you remember that movie, Soylent Green,
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to talk about what the Soylent Green part of it was, but there was a little blurb in it that man had destroyed the oceans and the land had been contaminated. It was not arable anymore. So all these people in North America, they had been shoved into these mega cities. So that, I think, will be a result of probably some sort of, a disease outbreak and some sort of natural disasters. I don't foresee like a major war being fought, perhaps a civil war type of situation, but I don't think, the Russians invading and the Americans fighting them happening here. I don't see that happening. It may be at some point in future, yes, but not right now. Right now, I think what you got to worry about more is the geological issue and perhaps a pandemic issue, which is going to wipe off
Larry,
millions on this continent.
You probably saw one of the latest emails that Wilcox sent around. Did you get a chance to see that before yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your question also involve whether or not the United States can be seen as a player after the millennium? I don't think so. But what do you two guys think?
What do you mean after the millennium?
Well, I mean, to me, the United States, as far as I can see, okay, whatever that means, takes it in the shorts pretty well and ceases to become anything really as far as the power goes. To me, they seem, anyway, symbolically that you can cut it. I don't see the United States as being involved in anything that may come down to it, in the Valley of Armageddon or whatever. And I don't know, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Larry, but I was wondering if you were also questioning whether the United States is decimated pretty early on.
I think so, Viz. I don't really see anything in the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel, and the prophecies there. And I'm not an expert, but I don't really see anything that resembles the United States of America. I think that the United States will cease to be a superpower. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see this country split into several, smaller, I don't know if you call them nation states or territories or what, but I think eventually this country is going down. It's just there's too many strains, too many stresses on this country to
survive it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way I see it. And I can't back that up with any hard evidence, but other than just what I see around me at this time and the way, the near future looks. I mean, we're economically, I think after the bailouts, trillions of dollars. I don't even know how many $1 trillion the bankers extracted from the taxpayers of this country. And I just don't see. If you don't have an economy that works, how can you maintain yourself as a great nation? You just can't.
Paul, you had some thoughts about that with regard to Babylon, and one of its, stanchions being perhaps Manhattan. But be that as it may, besides being economically decimated, I think it's very clear that we're going to take it very badly as far as the first time we've ever been invaded or have incurred bombings. Well,
it's quite possible that, like I said, we do have a long road ahead of us. And it is quite possible, again, this is conjecture, but it is very possible that North America would end up being something like what we see in post-apocalyptic movies quite early on, in the very beginning of these sorrow stages. So that, again, if we do have some major geological upheavals, as there have been way too many Hollywood movies that have, predicted these things coming, and if there is some sort of major disease outbreak that ravages the population, then that the point being that there may not be any need for any sort of invasion, but it would leave the land would be essentially, like I said, it would end up being a post-apocalyptic world quite early on. Now, from a scriptural and prophetic perspective, to back up perhaps what Larry was saying, if we believe, which I know, Keith, you do, but that the Vatican, Rome, is, say, the head of the beast, then the judgment of the beast, the judgment of the whole of Babylon, comes at the very end, very close to the end of this of these events. That will be something which will happen in the very latter stages. So it is quite possible that the Eurasian part of the world will be, and Israel, of course, is very central to this as well, so that the Eurasian part of the world, maybe not the UK being an island, but the mainland Europe and, most of Russia and Asia would be left more or less intact for the time, because we know that in the very latter stages, the kings of the East and the river Euphrates and all that are still around, as, of course, is the nation of Israel and Jerusalem. So it is likely that those are going to be the regions that will be the power centers later on as we progress through these end-of-the-world events. So, yes, I would have to think that the power, and that does not mean that the might of whatever the technologies and the military power that the U.S. has today is not going to get transferred over to Europe or some other area. That I don't believe that that the entire military or the Navy will be decimated, because ultimately all the armies of the countries of the whole world are going to join and unite to try and fight the return of Jesus, as we are taught in Psalm 2. Why do the heathen rage and the kings of the earth set themselves together against the Lord and against his anointed? And we read that in the book of Revelation as well, that all the armies of the world, they are under one banner, which is the beast Antichrist, and they are going to fight the Lord. So, like these armies are one, at some point in time, they are going to become one. Yes, in the meantime, they may have wars between themselves and they'll have fights, etc. But that's what I see, that the regions which will be the power centers, which have been historically and traditionally the power centers, is the European continent and the Asian. And North America may go into the dustbin of history relatively early in this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
Yes.
Oh no, I mean it's
It
Americans.
does, and it's tough to swallow because you see such terrible destruction, suffering in the offing, but that's just the way it is, and you have to look at it and accept it for being a very strong probability.
Larry, I also want to point out something. When we start adding up the numbers, in not numerology, but the numbers of fatalities, etc., that are actually recorded in the Bible, I would have to think. And there is some, scripture. I would have to look it up, but I think before the end, some 90% of the people that are alive today will die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So therefore, again, the magnitude of the destruction is so great that for us to picture that for North America or the U.S. will be the way it is today.
That's the way the New World Order wants it, too.
Right.
Paul?
So, all these cities that exist today, like Toronto and L.A. and Detroit and Dallas, they may not be around. No, I would have to say most of them will not be around, at least not in anything resembling their
the
present.
form they are now. They would basically be wastelands.
Yes.
I see a future where the cities are basically, just places where savage criminality reigns, gangs.
Yes.
Running
Mad
cities.
Max, the Mad Max kind of scenario.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the Book of Eli, if you've seen that.
Yes.
It would be that kind of world. And, occasionally I think there might be like an overall power, a police power that would come in and try to keep them down, but there may not even be that. It may just be the gang.
Well, that would be kind of, see, that's, if what you said, that the old world wants to see that inflicted on the new world,
exactly.
Then that would also fulfill that, those plans of the New World Order.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That they want the world order to be in the old world, not here.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they will rejoice to see that.
Yeah. I think it's all, the two power centers of the world as far as cities go will be Rome with the Vatican and Jerusalem, which the Vatican wants to take over. And the way the Bible explains it is that the Antichrist would declare himself to be God in the temple in Jerusalem. And I think that will be the seat of the world government will be in Jerusalem at some point.
Yes. So you have Rome in Europe, and then you have Jerusalem. And I would tend to think that because of the Gog-Magog thing, Moscow, Russia, and then you have the kings of the East, so Beijing and even like India, they would still have some a great deal more power right up to the very end.
You look at what's going on economically, and not just economically, but also militarily. The world is getting much stronger in the East. I mean, you look at China, that is a superpower. You look at Japan.
But you see, this is the fulfillment of prophecy, because
exactly.
China, up until 30, 40 years ago, it was worse than a third world country.
Right.
And it's been built up by Western money and technology.
Exactly.
By the Westerners.
Yeah, it's been shifted over there. Yeah.
Exactly, and they have done it by design.
Exactly.
With a future.
So if we do understand that there are powers greater than man that are running this show, then that makes sense. If this was purely on a human level where, we thought as Americans and Brits and who in their right mind would have done that, what they have done, ship all their industries over there, like to transfer all their military technologies to them, to build their own, they're building their own coffins, like why would they want to do that? It makes no sense on a purely human perspective. And that's why these things have, spiritual forces behind them that have caused these things to happen. Otherwise, China would have always been a backwater country for the next 1,000 years if it wasn't for American and European technology that has gone down there and the money to build that country up.
Yeah. And moving factories wholesale over to China.
Same thing with India.
Yep.
India has always been a third world country, and no way that they would have been any sort of economic power or military power unless...
Now they are a nuclear power. They
exactly.
have nuclear weapons, and they have
yes.
a huge army, and they have the potential of even bigger army with such a huge population.
I think we talked about this on one of our shows previously, but these are the kings of the East, China and India in particular, and Russia to a certain extent. They are the kings of the East, and they have been built up. Otherwise, with the power after the Second War that America had, America could have ruled the world for the next 1,000 years, and nobody would have been able to touch them, if they had not shot themselves in the foot, which they have done.
Yeah, but that was scripted as well. That was for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we were raised up under the reigns of Europe. I mean, Europe is not, I know that people don't feel like this. I know Charles doesn't, but to me, Europe is the Holy Roman Empire, and they're not going to get a scratch on it. Everybody else is going to have it happen because of them being thrown into
I think Britain might, but continental Europe probably not.
All right, well, okay, well, here's what's interesting, though, now we've mentioned the UK. Out of London, in around 1909, you had two works. One was Mackinder's, and Halford Mackinder was a geopolitical analyst, probably the first there ever was. And he's the one that put forth the idea of World Island being the mass between Lisbon and Vladivostok, and that whatever empire, probably the last, that could control that landmass would control the world.
Mm-hmm.
And aside from that, perhaps, coming out of an ecclesiastical source was Robert U. Benson's futuristic work called Lord of the World, which foresaw a war in which the Asian Empire moved westward, and they were fretting in the UK that the only country that could come in and stand up against that would be the Americans. Now, remember, this was 1909. There wasn't a First World War yet. I don't think Mackinder, I do believe, was a projectionist in a sense. He looked at what was there. Benson's work, I'm thinking, is probably from a little bit on the dark side. However, they both somewhat concur. And as we look at things to come, we were pretty much raised, fatted, and used as a hitman, a professional gunslinger, a boxer, whatever you want to call it. And Napoleon's army was used for that, and we've gone through all that. There's always somebody around that's used to scourge everyone else. And we've been used also. And our time is coming to an end because I think we would agree that whatever's going to happen is not going to leave any 700-pound gorilla to rule the world. It's all going to be somewhat leveled out. But before that happens, there's going to probably be a three-way fight on the European continent between ourselves, who are seen as the interlopers, and China and Russia. And lastly, think about it, and this is what Mackinder said also. Look at all that vast land that we've been taught to think is just backwards and frozen and all this stuff. Those people have treasure troves of resources beneath the soil and a whole big population. And that's not just for nothing, if you will. And that's why I think you're going to see the Russian Empire and the Chinese Empire square off with us, and whatever happens, happens. But that whole landmass has yet to be tapped. I mean, you think about the lack of population in those areas and what it could sustain, and it's not even close. It's almost as if both those countries were kept for the last phase, whatever that means.
I would agree with that. And also we need to keep in mind that, at the present time, the powers that be, they are very coordinated. They all work as one. But the Bible does say that there will come a time when they will definitely turn upon each other. So there will be some real wars that will be fought between these nation states in the future as well.
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, at the moment, like you may say that London or New York, they run the whole world, whether it's Beijing or Moscow, or Tokyo, they all bow to the will of the bankers. But that scenario itself is going to change at some point in the future.
I think so.
And that probably will come once we see these, once we get through this first phase of all these destructive events that are coming, when, the geography of the world has changed, when the power structures have been changed, so how exactly, how it'll take shape, or what will take the place of what we have at the present time, it's not really possible to determine the exact nature of that, but we do know that the change is coming, and it will be logical to think that one of the changes would be a great reduction of the power of the U.S. and perhaps all nations will have their power reduced to a certain extent, right?
Yes.
So that. Yeah, that's so they will be more equally matched. Right now, I think that the U.S., if they wanted to, they could take out the whole world just with the type of technologies that they have in their arsenal. But I think in the future, there will be some more evenly matched foes that will go at each other.
Also, Larry, you were mentioning about, cities like Escape from New York, that kind of scenario. But, remember, depopulation is a key element in the dark side's agenda. And even however many thousands, millions, whatever, exist after this, it was their desire to have what we call these islands of habitat, which you can see in Agenda 21 and some other places, where the projection is to have the people living basically in communities of character is where we're going with this too, but that's for a later time, about deliberately making not a megalopolis, but a very large center where you don't have to go anywhere else. You can do everything right here in this place and do not go off into the countryside, because all the red radical greenies are going to rewild the world as much as they can. So that always played into that whole element, was that we get to get corralled. The furry and the feathery things get to go ahead and run wild. And so, that's definitely in our future, because let's face it, to control a population spread out through urban, rural areas it's very, very cost ineffective. So let's get everybody in one tuna can, and we can deal with them.
Oh yeah, they want to herd us into large cities.
Yeah.
That which is left, the remnants, after I think Paul's absolutely correct. I believe that they will use biowarfare, and it will be done obviously. It will be hidden as to the real source of it. But I think there will be plagues, if you will, of, viral diseases which will take out an awful lot of people in areas where they want it. And they can design these viruses the way they want them to be to attack certain types of people, and, from a genetic profile.
Well,
so God only knows, and I mean that literally, God only knows what kind of horrors face us in the future.
A sociobiologist back in the 70s said something when I was in school for the first time, and I thought it was very interesting. He was saying how stupid human beings are, because they're the only species, whatever, that kills to settle situations. And when they do that, they send their strong off to war, which makes sense if you want to win. But what does that also do? That kills your stronger strains. So who stays home and breeds? Those that we would call, for lack of a better term, 4F.
Yeah, or unfit.
Right. So you kill genetically sound people, and then you leave the supposed weak. And this is really being a black and white deal, okay? We understand that. And they go ahead and breed. But as Paul was saying, and we all have been thinking about, and that is, to me, it makes no sense, like with chemtrails, for instance, to poison a whole people and stuff. No, not before they fight. My point is that after the fight goes on, much like the Spanish flu after World War I, then you send the microbes out to kill off what's left that's weak. And then you got what you're going to have for the rest, pretty much, of humankind's rule over this world. So to me, it's always disease that comes in after to clean up what's almost ready to die. But you don't do it beforehand because you want the best and the brightest to go out and get killed.
Well, yeah, you got to use them before you go ahead and clean up with the mob.
Right.
So,
a dark outlook, but not necessarily false.
Yeah, it's a great deal of what we're talking about. If we were not Christians, if we did not believe in Jesus Christ and praise His holy name, but if we did not believe in Him and His promises, then this kind of thing could drive you to right off a cliff.
Drive you to drink at the very least, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll drink to that. But remember something too now, and because I'm going to say this later on, I want to do the whole thing here. It's not for me to do that right now with you two fellows here. But remember something, and that is the secularists out there. And I don't think anybody's really an atheist. I don't really think anybody's an agnostic. I think everybody knows what the deal is deep inside, because I have to laugh at how upper lips, furl when you talk about Christ, because there is definitely the stumbling block. But they believe, the secularists do, and all those that are involved in, whatever pagan organizations and stuff, they believe that sooner or later humankind will raise itself up by its jackboots, and they'll become some great, era in humanity, where, like Steely Dan sang, it'll be spandex jackets for all of us. Yeehaw. Yeah. But they don't believe it's going to go down the tubes. In fact, we are reviled because we say we're giving up and we don't want to fight it because we know we have God. So we hope that this happens, and that's not the case.
No.
But the case is, take a look. If you thought you had a fair fight, you're out of your mind.
Well, no sane, decent human being wants to see war and destruction and plague and all these other horrible things coming down on humanity. No, unless you're some kind of psychopath serial killer type.
Or a Christian.
Yeah.
But they deliberately misconstrue it to say we want all this bad stuff to come down.
No, absolutely not. But we know that it has to be this way because of the powers that be. And the New World Order doesn't care, and I'm not just saying that the human beings involved in the New World Order, but the New World Order from the standpoint of the evil, dark spiritual forces that are bringing these things down, they don't care whether you like it or not. It's coming. They're going to bring it down. And these people that think they're, they think they're only fighting flesh and blood, and they're not.
No. But, as somebody pointed out, and as I had to agree, somebody made a comment about how much the occult had seeped into the 9/11/truther/patriot idiot movement. And I believe that fully to be true. I believe that back in the old days, when I finally decided not ever to talk to these people again, on the radio show. But they're the ones who are involved in this as well, and yet they're the very ones who are going to turn around and obviously side with what else? Whatever the earthly power is going on at the time.
Exactly.
So they believe there's a way out, and in essence there may be for a while, but only as we know, while that flesh is still working. After that, it is an eternity, and, obviously you have made your move. They don't believe in that. I get that too. But the point is that the dark side thinks it can win. Why else would they do this? Why else would, like, a whole generational family like the Rockefellers give themselves over to this? So,
Well, these are people who believe that hell will be a place where it's a constant party.
Oh, no, they believe that Satan will take care of them.
They really believe that they're going to just, be having a big orgy and, blowout in hell, and it'll all be fun and games. And I got news for them. Yeah. This will be a place of torment and suffering. This will be a place where they will be punished for that which they've done on this earth and for rejecting the Lord Jesus Christ. They will be separated from God, and there will be no fun there. But these people are crazy enough to believe that it's a place. I've seen statements from them, where they think they're going to eternal, fun and games. And it's so crazy. And I'm not talking about, your ordinary average person probably don't want to think about it at all, but a lot of these Luciferian types, that the Satanist types, that's what they think hell will be, is a big party.
Well, I tell you what, a lot of them live in Austin. But seriously, all of us would say, no matter what our feelings were, spiritually, at some point you have to be a little pragmatic and say, okay, let me analyze this, and how are we going to overtake it? And, we are way past that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm all for a good fight, but I mean, this isn't even close to it. And so what'll happen is when people realize who have not given themselves over to, anything, whatever, who ride the fence, they'll pitch in with whoever seems to be like the winning side. It's always been like that throughout civilization. It'll be no different now. I just don't want them around me. And I find them to be a very, very precarious element in whatever's left of this 9/11 truth thing. Because to me, in 10 years, I think we can all admit of watching this, it has gotten worse year by year. I mean, it's a joke. So,
well, it's the problem is that these people, many of them, they're different categories, but many of them don't believe in the supernatural, and they think that it's all a question of defeating the forces, the political forces.
The bad guys, yeah.
And you're not dealing with flesh and blood. You're dealing with powerful spiritual entities, evil spiritual entities who have, they relish the fact that they see a future with bloodshed and suffering. They enjoy inflicting bloodshed and suffering on humanity. That's what the devil does. That's what his minions do. And these people don't get that. That's so silly to believe in the devil. I mean, come on, Well, what are you, some kind of superstitious nut? You Christians are all crazy. Well, we're not crazy, and these people are going to find out.
But you see, that's what the Bible tells us, that in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them that believe not. So there really is, there is this mind of unbelief that has been conditioned in them, and it is always reinforced by all the information that comes at them 24/7. So everything in this world that they encounter is, almost everything I should say, is designed to reinforce that unbelief. And because they do have blinded minds. See, that's where we have to be thankful that what we know, it is not something that we are so clever or, we are so righteous that we understand these things. It is because God has had mercy on us and He has chosen to reveal these things to us. Okay, but the world as a rule, the majority of people in this world, they are blinded. They have, they have blinders over their minds. Like if you have, you put blinders on a person's eyes, obviously they're not going to be able to see the physical world. And same thing on their minds, the devil has put blinders on them so they can't see spiritual truth. And that's what Paul said, these things are spiritually discerned, and they are carnal beings. Their whole existence is centered on the flesh, that which they can see, feel, touch. That's what their life is, and that's why they feel that they can bring the change about by changing government, because they don't perceive that there is a greater, this is a greater, that's the arrogance of man too. When you look up, you go outside and then we look up, you look at infinity, we are staring into infinity, and we think that we are all there is, that's what people think. That, we are the most intelligent, we are the most highly developed, we are, man's actually, in the order of intelligence and in many other power, by just about every category, man is actually very weak and corruptible. And that's what the Bible says, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. So one way or the other, God had planned this right from the beginning, that the eternal world that is going to come, it is not the world of flesh and blood. It belongs to the new creatures in Christ who are flesh and spirit. And that is a qualitatively different being that we are going to be, that will be the heirs of that kingdom and that world which is to come. So when we understand that, flesh and blood is transitory, it is temporal. We are going to pass this, and we are not going to be able to save this no matter what we do. Then everything begins to make sense, and we can start planning our real future, not, when we turn 65, but when we leave this body.
Exactly. Sometimes as a Christian, I kind of feel like I'm one of the characters in that movie, They Live, and I have a I have a pair of sunglasses.
Exactly.
You walk around like a stranger in a strange land.
We are.
Going on around you, and these people can't see it.
Like even people, like I look at people and I'm going like, they're not the same species. And in a very literal sense, Larry, they are not. We are two different species,
Right. And it's not, and I don't say that out of some kind of arrogance like I'm, it's just that.
It's more of a weight, like in the prophets, in the Old Testament, the prophets used to say the burden of the word of the Lord, and the burden. So it is burdensome sometimes because, you wish there was somebody around you who you could relate to and who would understand the things that you're talking about.
Right.
But we're surrounded by, strange people. And they really are strange and they think it's normal. I guess, but, normal people in this world, they are actually very strange because they are illogical, they are uninformed. They are, mean-spirited. That's what people generally are like. And they're not very intelligent. Frankly, like they may have read a lot or whatever, but still doesn't mean that, it's, and you're right, it's not, we don't say these things out of arrogance. We're just stating the fact.
Right.
And I'm glad that, we can talk amongst ourselves and we understand what we're saying.
And you realize, just as Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. And it's not. And we are not of this world. And we're not supposed to be getting ourselves enmeshed in this world and loving the things of the world. I mean, I get very little pleasure out of the things of the world.
No, the older I get, the more I hate this world, Larry.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I do. Everything about the world, and I'm referring not to the beauty of creation. I love the waters, the mountains, the trees, the birds. I love all that God has created, but the systems that Satan has created.
Right, and the way people behave toward each other.
Exactly.
I get really sick of seeing the brutality and the callousness and the selfishness of people around me. And I'm always asking God in my prayers to help me to become a better man so, that I can avoid those traps,
It's just like, they're backbiting each other, they're talking nasty,
Right.
There is like a viciousness about people, and they don't perceive that, they think that this is just the normal way to be, and I suppose it is normal for them to be like that.
Right.
But it is, people are very, evil. What else can you say?
Cruel, belligerent. I mean, all the things that the Apostle Paul described in the first chapter of Romans,
Absolutely, yes. And it gets worse, and the Bible does say that they will get worse and worse. So, we shouldn't have any false hopes that things are going to get better. They're not.
I don't know. I assume we may be coming to the end of this, and there's something I wanted to mention to you, Larry, and now that Paul's here, if it's okay, and that is one of the things I got from Peikoff's book, The Ominous Parallels, and which I think is happening here, is that you kind of want to turn off intellect at some point and just appeal to, what would you call it, like brute instincts that the masses can engender. And that happened, I believe. Otherwise, how do you explain the Nazis and the Hitler Youth and the Bund and all that? And I think that might be happening here because, and I had written this in an email, the many ways that you could get Americans to get angry and want to, turn out more or less, without thinking. And that is, we could have an economic collapse that could be blamed on China for calling in the debt. Here's the problem. You want to get people mad, you got to give them something or someone to get mad at. And then they don't have to...
Right. That's what Hitler hit upon.
There you go.
And it's people enjoy hating. They need some object of hate. He gave them scapegoats to hate. He gave them the Jews. He gave them the communists. He gave them the liberals. These are the people that are causing your problems. These are the people you can hate.
But then what's interesting is, I don't know if you want to bring it to an end here, but I would say what I'm looking at is that at some point, Hitler and company had to take an internal thing. After it was done, you got rid of those those bad people, you got to turn it without. You've got to turn it externally. And I'm watching now to see, and I may not be around, all of us may not be around for this, but sooner or later there's going to be internal problems. You could say they're happening right now, but a little bit stronger than this. But then we've got to be unified, and the only way that can happen is to turn it without, and then we get into a war. So, but you've got to.
That was his overall goal, was to pump up a war. First you give them like you say, the internal enemy, the people that have stabbed you in the back and have caused all your problems.
Right.
And then you get it outward. And all he was saying, and it was written up for him, the Pan-German program was to expand to the east, and that was put into his head by Father Bernard Stampfel, the Jesuit priest who really wrote the Mein Kampf.
Yep.
You know.
All right, so I threw that out to you because I think what you have to do is become, like I said, some insensate individual, hair blown back in the wind, nostrils flared, and pecker gorged with blood, and to go off and want to kick somebody's butt. And I think that's what's going to happen to us in this country.
Justin, to end this from my perspective, I would like to say, which is something you and I have discussed, Keith. You see, we look at the elites, we look at the apex of the pyramid, and we point at these people, and we think that they are somehow more evil or more wicked than the person who is at the base of the pyramid. But we got to keep in mind that what supports the apex is the base.
Exactly.
Okay? It's the whole pyramid is evil, and that's what the Bible tells us, that there is none righteous, no, not one. Anybody given a half a chance will scramble up that pyramid so fast that it would make your head spin. Okay, so the ones at the bottom, they are victimized, no doubt, by the ones at the top.
Yep.
But that doesn't make them any better than the ones at the top.
Okay? But they're able to be victimized because their hearts are evil as well.
Exactly. So you know what? If they would not support. The top is kept in place by those at the bottom. When in Nazi Germany, if they didn't have those Gestapo guys, if they didn't have the SS, and if you know one good book you got to read is The Pink Swastika. It's online.
I have read it. Yes, sir.
Okay. It is the pleasure that these guards and these Gestapo guys they took, and in Soviet Russia, they used to relish torturing people. They used to relish, and you had the whole army of these people that were willing and lined up for these jobs.
Right.
They called it the
fought
TSA.
each other to get these jobs. Do you think that the Americans will be any better? Like the TSA, all these, there's no shortage of evildoers at the base.
You're exactly
So the whole
right.
thing is corrupt.
Right.
Joseph Conrad embraced this in his book Heart of Darkness, and of course that was brought to the screen titled Apocalypse Now. But the message was lost in Apocalypse Now, and that is, as we saw with the rogue military element in, I guess it was the Congo, when there is nobody to keep you in check, what will humans do? And that is, sort of like a seed or a send.
The Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, they'll become right. They'll
Savages.
become corrupt. That's right. And what you guys said is true. As somebody had mentioned about how many volunteers there were in the Gestapo. You've got people who seem to live and basically do live humdrum lives, but they seethe below the surface. And when you give them a chance to have a little power, inflict a little pain, no problem. Of course, we saw that experiment from the 60s or the 50s when
those people
when they get hit with a jolt, and then all of a sudden they had to stop the people from zapping them.
Yeah,
they enjoy it. They take a vicious pleasure in it.
But that's part of the flesh, and we all know it, and that's what's waiting out there. And that's why there's going to be no fence sitters when the time comes, because most of these people, let's just put it this way, those who don't believe in an afterlife, which I think everybody does, but they really don't want to do anything about it. Those who don't believe in a Jesus Christ, in a salvation, what are they going to do? It only makes sense to do one thing. If you don't believe in an eternity based on submission, which is not a hard thing for us to do, to a Lord, He's not a bad taskmaster, but if you don't want to submit because you don't like that word, if you don't want to obey because you don't like that word, then what are you going to do? You're going to play the hot hand and do whatever you have to do to survive on this planet, and that is, I don't want those people around me, even if they're in the truther movement or whatever, because those people will drop a dime on you within a minute.
No, actually, it's more than that, Keith. You know what? Like Bob Dylan sings that song, you got to serve somebody. But when they don't believe in Jesus, he says, if you're not for me, then you are against me. Then by default, they are servants of the devil.
If you don't make
and
the
he comes not but to steal, to kill, and to destroy, and therefore they do the same things.
Understand when I say this, because we're not going to get into the whole thing about Arminianism. But anyway, the thing is this. You make the choice, and the choice will be made for you. But you're not getting off this planet without it. Right.
Yes, totally.
All right. So, Larry, did we completely destroy your your show here?
No, absolutely not. The whole idea here was to just ask questions and have Paul respond because, like I said, he's been doing a lot of research on this, thinking about this a lot, and personally, he's one of the most refreshing people I've ever heard in regards to Bible prophecy because he takes it, like he said, forget all this organized religion, because a lot of that may be true, but a lot of it is just tradition that's been handed down, and it may not be the truth. It may not. The interpretation is not correct, is what I'm trying to say.
Forever to Paul's credit, and I think you'll remember when you said this to me, Paul. It was early on. I'm not even sure you ever came on first. We were kind of just conversing. But I was going off on having read the book by Quigley, Anglo-American Establishment, and I felt I had found the perps. It was Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table, and then Milner's Kindergarten. And I was going on about it with you, and you said, it's not them. And I'm like, well, why? And you said, whatever or whoever is being brought out into the light and examined that closely, they're giving that up. It can't be them. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you're right. I mean, that is a litmus test for a lot of things. We hear all about the Bilderbergers from Jones and from the American Free Press. They throw them out there. But that is, like I said, what you told me that day, I was like, you know what? That's right. If they let you examine it and they give you the information, you can be sure that's not the one that's sitting on top of the dung heap.
Yeah.
So that was a landmark moment for me, kid, and you can take the blame for that. All right, last comments, Larry. I'll direct it where you wish.
Well, I was just going to say that what Paul is brought out today is that we have a very long way to go before the return of Jesus Christ, the second coming, and that we face a very difficult future. I mean, very difficult future. And one thing that he pointed out that probably true is that people like us that are on the other side of 50 probably won't see it anyway. We'll probably be gone before that time. But
which may not be such a bad thing,
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought about it the other day. My father died last year, and my best friend, my cousin, died about 2.5 years ago. And one thing I thought about the other day, I was kind of a little bit sad thinking about it, and then I realized, they're not going to have to suffer through, these terrible things that are going to come upon mankind, and in that way it was merciful. But at any rate, it's just been a really enjoyable show, and I wanted to, at some point to bring the show more from a Christian perspective, and and talk about the immediate future of the United States, and we had become what we hated. Well,
that is, sadly, that's the history of the world, whatever begins as something that is somewhat pure, because I don't think there's been ever really a pure and holy civilization completely in history. But, it doesn't take long. If you look at the history of Israel in the Old Testament, it doesn't take long for the corruption to set in. That's just the human heart. It is corrupt. Therefore, for anybody to expect that the United States would not go down that same road is very naive. So, yes, we don't want to see these things happening. because, it is not going to be pleasant for anyone, but at the same time, it's inevitable. So we might as well understand that which is coming and prepare the best for it, which, of course, the first preparation for those of us who believe is, of course, in the spiritual, and be ready that when Jesus said, and be ready to endure unto the end, and to love not our lives unto the death if need be. And if we are ready for that, then you know what? No matter what comes our way, we don't have any hope in this life anyhow. So bring it on.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I came to a final epiphany sometime in March, which isn't a big aha, I guess, but I do mention it. And that is, I understand now that history repeats itself, not necessarily because people forget the past or whatever. It's because we're pretty much guaranteed to act the same way toward the same stimuli in whatever epoch that we're in. You'll always get the 85% that does this, you'll get the 10% that does this, you'll get the 5% that does that. It just comes with the flesh. It's okay. I get it. But that's the reason why we go through these things all the time, and we never really understand that Lucy will never hold a football down when Charlie Brown comes to kick it. I mean, that says, I'm not saying that Schultz had that in mind, but it's perfect because we keep trying to kick the football thinking that she's going to hold it. It's just the way it is. And it comes with the flesh. It's nothing that's essentially either good or bad. It just is. But when we all get together now, and I realize now that what's really important for those who believe on Jesus Christ, and that is, you got suffering to alleviate, you got sheep to feed, do that. How in the world are we stumping for candidates and getting involved all this other crap when the suffering's right outside our door, and we can certainly channel our energies into something where we don't ask for a benefit, we do it because it's supposed to be done. And that's where I'm leaving this gig and going out and putting my efforts where my mouth is. And I think that's a good way of doing things because in the end, you cannot. I said to Angie the other day, Angie, you can't move the Rockies with a shovel. It ain't going to happen. So there's other things to do, and what will happen, and there'll be enough, surcease and succor for us. And that's all there is to do it. But we see everybody going off like crazy. We see bad doctrine, but that's the way it is. It'll always be that way with the masses. So if you're not going to be part of that, then direct your energies into something where you can actually make a difference. Certainly it isn't in... And I told William Ramsey the other day, I go, you know what? Trying to share with people about the way things really are in a secular governmental sense is as bad as trying to witness to people about Jesus Christ. I mean, not that you shouldn't do it, but you realize you can talk to 100 people. Maybe
well, sorry to interrupt, but
no,
I always kind of laugh about that because, you see, you cannot witness to people. You can only be a witness to people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I mean,
So that's another one of those little just terminology things that is just accepted as, the truth, but it really doesn't make any sense.
It's like what the kid said to his grandfather, shut up and play cards. And it's true. No, I mean, it's the time to do things. So anyway, I thank you both. And, Larry, I'm going to throw it to you, at least if you want to make any kind of summation remarks. But I think, and I know you've been happy to have Paul here. I am too. And it was nice we all got together. And I'm glad, Larry, you came up with the idea to bring Paul into this one.
Yeah, I absolutely had always wanted to have Paul come on the show. And especially at the end because he was talking about Bible prophecy, and of course, that relates to the future of the United States. And we were talking about, we are what we hated and what the United States had become and is becoming. Mm-hmm. And in relation to the Nazis and Nazi Germany. And, the great thing about it is, on this show, we have talked a great deal more about Jesus Christ. We of course talked about Jesus in all the shows, I think, or at least we should have if we didn't. But that was another point. Was I'm doing this, and I think you are too, Viz, because you want to do something for the Lord and to try to disseminate information to people and possibly to hold Christ up and have him draw people to him. And that's been my whole purpose behind the whole series, was to try to do something for the Lord and to show people that he is the way. He said it himself, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me. There is no way out but up. There is no way except through Jesus Christ. Praise his holy name. He is everything. He is the Alpha and Omega. And if anybody out here that is listening to the sound of my voice, if you will try to put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ and ask him to come into your life, it will save your life, literally save your life, and you will be able to spend an eternity with God and in the presence of God, which is the gift of eternal life. The Bible says in John 3:16 that for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And that was the whole purpose of Jesus' mission on earth, was to bring man back into relationship with God, because without his sacrifice on the cross, through the shedding of his blood, there could not be remission for sin, and God could not come back into relationship with man. And that's the whole crux of the Bible. And so I wanted to put my little sermon in there at the end, and that's really all I have to say.
Well, I thank you both for coming on, and I have to laugh. Do the three of us look like we're so mind-controlled? But, that's the stuff I hear, Do we look like we're slaves to something we submitted to that is just so burdensome and punitive? No. There's freedom. There isn't slavery. And that's all I'm going to say. But, of course, those who want to resist, okay, fine. But don't tell us what we know. Don't interpret it the way you want to interpret it to get you off the hook, as if to say, okay, I don't have to do it because I've deemed it as such. I'm sorry to blow those myths up, but you know what? There's freedom here. And, it's faith. That's why they call it faith, because you can't intellectualize it. We either get it or we don't. So, Paul, up in the Great White North, as Toronto fails to make the National Hockey League playoffs another year, and your children are probably all ticked off about that, although I know you're not. Again, check out the website, if you will, signsoftheend.net, also apocalypse2010.blogspot.com, and also there are 2 video channels, for as long as they let him keep them, where you can find Paul speaking in these videos. Thanks very much, Paul. I appreciate it. Good to get you back again, and I'm probably going to talk to you one more time, if that's okay. And Larry, I guess we got a 30th or a 31st in us somehow, some way, as now we are about 2 weeks from ground zero. Yeah,
I think it'll probably just be a 30th. I'm planning to visit my mom on Mother's Day.
All right.
So I guess it'll be, the 19th will be the last show.
Live from Florida, yes. Hey, Paul, I'm always confused about holidays between the United States and Canada. Do you have Mother's Day up there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right.
We are the 51st state, you know that.
Well, you have the coolest holiday in the world, Boxing Day. That's the best.
I know. It's pretty much same everywhere.
All right.
Anyhow, well, thanks guys for it was fun talking with you both, and hopefully we got some good information out there.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say that people sometimes ask me what are we supposed to do, and from a believer's perspective, if you read in the book of Joel, it makes it quite clear. God says, "Turn unto me with all your heart, and with fasting and with prayer." There you go. So that's as simple as that. So let's all do that in this time, and God willing, we will. Not willing, with according to His promise, we will see the time, which is going to be a sight to behold, and that's what we long for, and that's what we wait for. The return of our Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ.
All right. Listen, Paul, thanks a lot. Larry, thanks a lot. Again, I'll see you both one other time. And
okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.